Well, President Trump's tariffs have arrived, and they're hitting countries around the world, with collection beginning on the 7th of August. In Africa, many countries saw their exceedingly high rates lowered to just 15% in a magnanimous effort on the part of the Trump administration, since most of them didn't make any effort to negotiate with the U.S. South African officials belatedly begin to take the tariff issue seriously, or at least to pay attention to it. The 30% tariff, which U.S. Customs will begin collecting on August 7th, is the highest in all of sub-Saharan Africa and comes after repeated insults and transgressions on the part of the African National Congress-led government of national unity, which have left a once healthy, robust diplomatic relationship in tatters over a range of domestic and international policies imposed by the ANC. Parks Tao and Ronnie Lamola have stated that South Africa poses no trade threat to the U.S. economy nor its national security, emphasizing that its exports support the U.S. industrial base and often do not compete with U.S. products. If only that were true. The trade deficit combined with foreign aid have left a gaping hole in our balance of trade for decades. Now, South Africa's dismissed rampant speculation that its failure to negotiate a lower tariff was because of its local affirmative action policies, BEE, which President Trump and most reasonable people have criticized because they're racist. They're saying that that's not the reason why the trade issue has not been resolved. This is perhaps the only wise statement to come out of the Thule House in several months, because they are correct. While many organizations and politicians running around spewing out of the mouth claiming that it's all about BEE, it's not. The United States is South Africa's second largest trading and most important trading partner. Now, Reuters reports that Pretoria has warned that the U.S. tariff could cost 100,000 jobs, with unemployment already over 30%. Sadly, the actual unemployment rate is likely well over 40%, not 30%, and 141,000 jobs in the automotive industry in South Africa alone are at risk, with hundreds of thousands of other jobs also on the line in agriculture, textiles, and ancillary industries. With no ambassador resident in Washington since Ibrahim Rasool was sent packing over racist insults, no special envoy, despite President Ramaphosa falsely telling the world he's appointed Kibisi Jonas to that role, no trade representative nor any trade delegation to Washington, Ramaphosa pretends he and his inept government care. In his weekly newsletter released today, the 4th of August, 2025, Ramaphosa makes the following statements. Our foremost priority is protecting our export industries. Now, the only problem with that statement is that it simply is not true. Trump announced his tariffs on April 3rd. For 4 months, the African National Congress-led government of national unity did nothing to develop offsets, protections, other markets, or even communicate with industries in jeopardy. This Johnny-come-lately rhetoric fools no one, save the 30% crowd who vote for these ghouls. As a government, we've been engaging the United States to enhance mutually beneficial trade and investment relations. All channels of communication remain open to engage with the U.S., except that they're not and have not been open. You're not even trying. We will continue to engage the U.S. in an attempt to preserve market access for our products. We must also accelerate the diversification of our export markets, particularly by deepening intra-African trade. Continue? How? There's no one in D.C., and you keep claiming you are waiting for D.C. to respond to your offer. Diversification of export markets? Unfortunately, that's not easy, nor is it a reasonable plan at this late stage. It takes years to establish entry into foreign markets. Asia is already saturated. Africa is almost impossible to penetrate and make progress. For instance, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was launched in 2021 to great fanfare, has yet to make almost any real significant impact on increasing South African exports to the continent. Nearly 90% of all of South Africa's exports go to its neighbors in SADC economies. Historically, Namibia, Botswana, and Mozambique make up nearly 40% of all exports from South Africa. They, along with Nigeria, with just 12%, are South Africa's main African trading partners. And now, after 4 months of dithering and gaslighting South Africans, suddenly the ANC is on the job after the tariffs have taken effect. South Africa on Monday, August 4th, 2025, outlined support measures for local companies that will be hit by a 30% tariff, including exemptions from some competition rules and financial support facilities. The government is also working on a support program which will include a working capital facility and plant and equipment facility, and ways to cushion the impact of job losses via the Unemployment Insurance Fund. Working capital? From where? Thin air? The Unemployment Insurance Fund will cover job losses? Unlikely. There's no money for either pie-in-the-sky effort. Now, the government has also established a support desk that will help exporters and producers explore alternative markets in the rest of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Trade officials said an export support desk would help the companies enter those markets by linking them up with embassies and potential buyers. And a more detailed set of measures will be discussed at the cabinet meeting on Wednesday. Now, my question is, such an activity does not already exist? What exactly are South Africa's exceedingly large number of diplomatic missions around the globe been doing for the past 30 years? Collecting paychecks? I mean, after all, that's the role of an embassy, is to increase your trade. One of its roles. So what have they been doing? Now they're going to come up with an export desk. Aren't embassies, don't they have people in the Ministry of Trade responsible for doing this already? And we'll find out more on Wednesday. Why didn't we find out more on May 3rd or June 3rd or July 3rd? Now, South Africa claims it's offered to import U.S. liquefied natural gas and some agricultural products, as well as invest in U.S. mining and metals recycling industries. So they've offered to buy $12 billion in liquefied natural gas over a 10-year period, $1.2 billion per year. That's less than the current trade deficit of $4 billion annually. And in a $28 trillion economy, it's little more than a rounding error. It's a joke. Now, Ramaphosa also claims that South Africa will push forward with plans for a free trade area for the African continent. What does that mean? The African Continental Free Trade Agreement already exists. Is he just blowing smoke up people's skirts? Does Ramaphosa not even know that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which in theory reduces all trade barriers across the entire continent for 54 countries, has been in effect since 2021? Maybe he was sleeping because it was COVID. Busy running around screaming, "Vaccine apartheid." South Africa's trade and foreign ministers said a block exemption from some aspects of the Competition Act were being developed that would allow competitors to collaborate and coordinate. They said the exemption would be published by the end of this week. Again, the end of this week, Wednesday, end of this week. Where were these measures 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago? And by the way, will these suspension of the Competition Act things, will that also include a suspension of the racist, broad-based black economic empowerment laws? Now, this 30% tariff right will really hit agriculture, automotive, and textile sectors hard in South Africa, and they've done nothing to help them. South Africa has a 30% and possibly 40% tariff on exports to the United States, but its neighbors came off far better with just 15%. For instance, Lesotho, which had initially been warned of a 50% tariff, took no action and saw theirs drop to just 15%. Ramaphosa came to America to talk to Trump, insulted Trump, interrupted his host, and then went back to South Africa and constantly insulted Trump and America after his return. He took no action to address America's concerns, which were relayed to him in May, and this is the result, a 30, likely 40% tariff. Reuters media claims that South Africa has tried for months to negotiate with Washington, offering to buy LNG, as I mentioned, and invest $3.3 billion in U.S. industries in a framework deal. But the effort was unsuccessful, even after Pretoria made a last-minute attempt to improve its offer. What last-minute attempt? All they did was publish a press release claiming that they signed an agreement. No such agreement exists. It was simply a checklist of things that need to be done and share it with the press. And then stated that they're waiting for Washington. That's not how you negotiate. You don't sit in South Africa, sign a piece of paper that you are just supposed to use to check what you're supposed to get done, and then sit there and say that you are waiting for Washington's response. That's balderdash. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa is being led by inept clowns. It is a clown car show. And this is the proof. They have no concept of what they're doing. They have no genuine desire to improve the situation of South Africa. And who suffers? While they play the role of progressive transformation agents, black South Africans get poorer. Not because of white monopoly capital, not because of racism. Well, yeah, it is because of racism, broad-based black economic empowerment, but not because of racism by minorities, but racism by the majority who claim they're helping the majority. A small coterie of cadres or cadre are the ones that run this country right into the ground while they drive around in plush vehicles and live in opulent apartments. This is sad, and it's entirely an own goal and unnecessary. What say you, South Africa? What say you, world? Cheers.